Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at how one incredibly humble ingredient basically saved an entire generation from starvation. Now, we're actually skipping our usual agenda today because I really want to jump straight into the stark, honestly shocking realities of the 1930s. What we're exploring today is not just a collection of old recipes. It's this fascinating look at human survival, food chemistry, and just pure culinary ingenuity. Okay, let's dive into this. 12 cents. In 1932, a Detroit auto worker managed to feed his entire family of 7 on exactly 12 cents a day. When you try to process the reality of that kind of devastating poverty, you really have to ask how it was physically possible to keep 7 humans alive on literal pennies. Well, the answer was a secret weapon sitting right there in the dark of the cellar, the potato. Section 1. The Depression's secret weapon, the potato as public health policy. During this era, the potato wasn't just dinner. It was literal public health policy that prevented mass scurvy. To put that into perspective on a macro level, American per capita potato consumption shot up by nearly 30% between 1930 and 1939. And that wasn't because of a sudden change in culinary tastes, right? It was driven by pure economics and hard nutrition. A single medium potato delivers 160 calories, 4 grams of protein, and, this is absolutely crucial, nearly half of your daily required vitamin C. This is exactly why kids during the Depression didn't develop scurvy in massive numbers, despite a huge lack of fresh fruit. It was so important that the government's Federal Bureau of Home Economics actively published pamphlets to teach housewives how to stretch the tuber into multiple meals, basically using it to keep urban food riots at bay. Now, what's really interesting about this is the sheer resourcefulness it demonstrates. Take potato peel broth. In 1933, a whole potato cost about 2 cents, and the peels were actually considered the most valuable part by mothers who really knew how to stretch a penny. So you'd scrub the potatoes, peel them thick, and drop those peels into boiling water with, maybe an onion skin or a scrap of bone if you had it, and simmer it for an hour. The starch from the skins naturally thickened the water, and then it was strained over stale bread. Now, it sounds desperate, but modern nutritionists actually confirm that most of a potato's nutrients live right there in the skin. So this golden, mineral-rich broth was a nutrient-dense survival staple for a Thursday night when payday was still, say, 2 days away. Section 2. Stretching pennies into feasts, defying the economics of the 1930s. Let's transition from the grim reality of poverty to the sheer economic efficiency of these meals. These numbers perfectly capture how agonizingly small budgets were somehow transformed into these massive yields. Take the fried potato sandwich. It's exactly what it sounds like. Crispy potato slices fried in bacon grease between white bread. It cost about 4 cents, but the heavy fat and starch carried steelworkers and coal miners through 10 hours of grueling physical labor. Then you've got Hoover stew, which was a pretty bitter nod to the president at the time, stretching potatoes, dried beans, and maybe a single hot dog to feed 5 people for 2 whole days for just 15 cents. And the potato and dean pot, that fed 8 people for 2 days for less than 15 cents. I mean, these kinds of yields were exactly what kept large working class families going. Nobody talked about it being poor food. It was just food. This quote really grounds our understanding of the time. These dense, starchy meals, they weren't romantic by any means, but they provided deep, hot comfort. And they maintained a sense of dignity for families living in shantytowns all across the country. Section 3. Culinary magic and illusions. Feeding the imagination. The next set of recipes shouldn't be framed as acts of desperation, but really as brilliant culinary deception performed by mothers protecting their kids. This is a brilliant example of balancing expectation versus reality. They called this mock fish. So Catholic families needed something fish-like for Friday dinners, but real fish, that was an impossible luxury. So instead, they mashed boiled potatoes, mixed them with an egg and cracker crumbs, shaped them exactly like fish fillets, and fried them up in lard. The crackling crust and that creamy center, maybe topped with a little homemade tartar sauce, completely fooled the children. It wasn't lying, right? It was just magic. And if we're talking about culinary magic, the process for potato candy is kind of mind-blowing. By taking one small boiled potato, mashing it up completely smooth, and slowly adding confectioner's sugar, the potato starch would bind the sugar into this soft white dough. Then you roll it out, spread it with peanut butter, and slice it up into little pinwheels. A single potato could literally make 40 pieces of candy for just 15 cents. This became a deeply treasured childhood memory for kids in coal mining towns, entirely replacing expensive birthday cakes or store-bought treats. Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds into the literal chemistry, the science of the spud, the ultimate flavor multiplier. Let's break down the actual chemistry of why the potato is such an effective staple. When cooked, starch granules swell up and act like microscopic sponges. And crucially, they absorb fat, salt, acid, and flavor entirely without losing their physical structure. It doesn't just turn to mush. This gave the potato its superpower as a flavor multiplier. Now, Depression-era cooks obviously didn't need a textbook to know the chemistry. They just knew that if you dropped a single bacon end or one leftover hand bone into a pot of potatoes, that sponge-like starch meant an entire meal for 6 people would taste intensely of meat. And it wasn't just for savory dishes either. The potatoes chemistry was leveraged beautifully in baking. Grandmothers would work mashed potato right into their chocolate cake recipes. The potato added so much moisture that the cake stayed incredibly tender for a week. Its faint natural sweetness meant they could use less sugar, and it perfectly stretched the expensive wheat flour budget. The result? This amazingly dense, fudgy chocolate cake that kept birthdays alive in households that had virtually nothing. Section 5, the convenience food shift, how we were sold a story. Now we're going to pivot to our source's pretty provocative analysis regarding the post-Depression food industry. I want to report these claims impartially, as they present a really fascinating argument about how our relationship with food changed over time. According to the analysis in our source, consider this timeline. In the 1930s, the raw potato essentially saves the country from starvation. But then, between 1934 and 1939, food advertising dramatically shifts away from those staple ingredients and pushes heavily toward branded, packaged convenience foods. Companies like Heinz, Kraft, and Campbell's began running these big campaigns that systematically reframed real cooking, the exact same skills that just kept families alive, as this awful drudgery that was suddenly beneath the modern housewife. Fast forward to 1955, and instant potato flakes had exploded into a billion-dollar industry. The source argues pretty strongly that this loss of kitchen knowledge wasn't just some accident, but a highly calculated shift driven by massive profit margins. Because think about it, there's no real profit in selling a raw sack of dirt-covered potatoes. However, a box of instant mashed potato flakes, that cost the manufacturer 2 cents to produce and was sold to the consumer for 25 cents. According to the source, we were systematically sold a story about convenience, right up until we completely forgot the incredible versatility of the raw ingredient itself. So the crucial point is Section 6, Reclaiming Lost Kitchen Knowledge, subtitled, The Resurgence of the Spuds. Let's look at the legacy here and maybe change how we view the spuds sitting in our pantries right now. Bringing this whole explainer back to the sensory joy and the massive value of these meals, we find some true lost classics. Take real potato soup. It utilized this brilliant technique where you simply crush a third of the potatoes against the side of the pot to naturally thicken the broth. Absolutely no heavy cream required. Or the boiled potato with everything, which allowed a family of 6 to eat a highly customized, filling meal just using whatever random pantry scraps they had on hand. And potato hash with bacon ends, which meant rendering dirt-cheap butcher scraps to infuse rich smoke and salt into every single bite. These dishes prove, without a doubt, that a raw potato, treated with just a little respect and knowledge, can absolutely keep a family fed and a kitchen warm. Which brings us to our conclusion for today. Based on everything we've uncovered, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought directly from our source material. Will you try the loaded baked potato, the potato candy, or the bean pot to prove your great-grandmother's knowledge is still alive? It's a real challenge to step back into your kitchen, grab that humble ingredient, and perform a little bit of your own magic. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.